Number 10. Bi-Beast. Created by an extinct race of aliens called the Bird People, Bi-Beast is an android with two heads stacked on top of each other. In one head is the knowledge of warfare and tactics, while the other is filled with information on culture. I mean, it's a little weird that the Bird People didn't just put all of this information into one slightly larger head, but hey, I'm just some guy on YouTube. What do I know about alien android design? First appearing in Incredible Hulk number 169, Bi-Beast was left alone in the floating city of Aerie after the extinction of his alien masters. When the city's machines stopped working due to deterioration, Bi-Beast captured Bruce Banner to try and force him to repair them. Banner tricked Bi-Beast and instead used the alien technology to cure Harpy and return her to her true form of Betty Ross. This resulted in a fight between Bi-Beast and the Hulk, but this fight was abandoned when Bi-Beast realized that MODOK was attacking the city. Rather than let the floating city be captured, Bi-Beast activated the city's self-destruct protocols, seemingly dying in the process. Now, Bi-Beast has reappeared a few times in the years since, trying to destroy the world and kill the Hulk, but honestly, other than his strange appearance, there's not much scary about him. But hey, someone's gotta be at the bottom of the list. Number 9. Cyclops. Cyclops is a one-eyed member of an ancient insectoid race who worship the dark gods. Cyclops was chosen to be an agent of these dark gods who gave him the task of finding them a power source that could summon them. If he succeeded, the gods promised to reawaken his race so that they could conquer Earth for themselves. He chose the Hulk as his power source and captured him in Avengers number 88, hoping to shrink him down to a more manageable size. When the Avengers interrupted this process to fight the villain, the Hulk was left alone and no one was able to turn off the machine, and the Jade Giant was accidentally shrunk so small that he vanished from sight. Cyclops found the Hulk in the microverse and the two battled, but Hulk came out victorious. Yet another villain who is more scary looking than anything else. I do like the idea of a bug cultist trying to bring back dark gods in order to take over the world though. He has only had 11 appearances, so maybe he can earn a higher spot on the list at some point in the future.
And at 8, Peeper. Peeper, aka Peter Quinn, is one of the weirder villains on our list. He was recruited by Magneto to be a member of the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but was abandoned with his new teammates when failing their first mission together, and getting defeated by Captain America. From there, he and his band of rejects became the Mutant Force and worked for Mandrill, which also got them arrested. Then, after that, Red Skull became their new sponsor. Years later, he would die at the side of a road, being devoured by Predator X while screaming. So if anything, based on all of that, Peepers doesn't actually seem all that scary now, does he? But in terms of his appearance, those large, eerie eyeballs of his are super unsettling. They give him various optical powers, including telescopic vision, microscopic vision, X-ray vision, and optic blasts. I do not want to know what he uses the X-ray vision for. No. And at 7, Onslaught. First appearing in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 53 in 1996, Onslaught is a sentient psionic entity created from the consciousness of two of the most powerful mutants, Charles Xavier and Magneto. During a prior battle, Xavier would become catatonic when using his abilities to shut down Magneto's mind. He was prompted by Magneto ripping the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton. Yeah, I could imagine why that would piss him off. This caused the darkest parts of Magneto's mind to enter into Xavier's consciousness, merging with the hero's own darkest tendencies, everything that he had repressed for the last 30 years, which eventually grew into an individual persona, otherwise known as Onslaught. After he was defeated the first time, his consciousness lingered, and he would later return the Onslaught Reborn storyline, the brand new but equally scary form. And at 6, Zorn. Zorn is a bit of a confusing character thanks to a series of retcons surrounding him. He worked as a teacher for the Xavier School of Gifted Youngsters, but then it was revealed that he was actually Magneto all along. At this point in time, the metal manipulator was dead. But then it was retconned yet again, revealing that Zorn was just a Magneto imposter and not actually Magneto himself. Lisai. Anywho, the reason why he gets a spot on our list is thanks to his dandy little helmet. It's a skull-like helmet, which is scary on its own, but it's meant to contain massive amounts of energy coming off of Zorn's head. He has a star for a brain. I mean, man, like if I saw someone who had a star for a brain, no bueno, avoiding that dude. And at number 5, Dark Beast. Dark Beast is an evil alternate version of Hank McCoy from Earth 295, the Age of Apocalypse reality. Because of Charles Xavier's absence, this version of Hank disregarded all sense of ethics, becoming a mad scientist who worked under Apocalypse. He would conduct cruel and unusual experiments in Apocalypse's name, and even managed to escape that reality before it imploded, showing up on Earth 616 and becoming quite the threat to the X-Men and Hank, and the 616 Hank while he was present. different. He's 20 years older than the 616 Beast and therefore isn't as physically strong as his counterpart, but still gives him a run for his money. Plus he's villainous, so you know, putting all that brain power to evil uses is not a good thing. Moving on to number 4, Mojo. Mojo is one creepy fella. First appearing in Longshot issue 3 in 1985, Mojo is an absurdist parody of network executives. He's part of an alien race known as the Spineless Ones, and is the dictator and a slaver of a dimension he rules called the Mojoverse, where all of the dimension's inhabitants are obsessed and addicted with Mojo's gladiator television programs. When he was created by Ann Noceti and Art Adams, Noceti specifically requested that Adams make Mojo as disgusting and unpleasant as possible. He's got wires that hold open his eyelids, inspired by a Clockwork Orange. And because of his large size, he rides around on a multi-legged flying platform that's armed with a bunch of deadly weapons and particle beams. In addition to his mastery of manipulation and several of his powers being derived from magic, Mojo is also able to generate an anti-life force field that makes him capable of killing things simply by touching them. He can wither plants and age humans. And at 3, Apocalypse. Apocalypse is one of the X-Men's most fearsome foes. He's an ancient evil, the first mutant, who is practically immortal and sees himself as the father of mutant kind. He operates under very Darwinian principles, believing in the survival of the fittest, killing off the weak in order to make the survivors grow stronger, for the betterment of humanity. He considers himself the apocalypse of the modern man and the father of what humanity will become, mutant kind. He fully believes that what he is doing is the right thing. He's ensuring evolution. Minus how terrifying his ideologies are, his abilities are, intense too. The ones at his disposal are tremendous. He has self-molecular control, a genius-level intellect, he can manipulate matter and energy, he can shapeshift, is capable of accessing astral planes, is telekinetic, telepathic, is a technopath. He can augment the powers of other mutants and transfer someone's consciousness into another being. In all of his appearances over the years, Apocalypse has always been one of the most physically intimidating villains in Marvel's comics, and considering what he's capable of, it's definitely not hard to find the character downright horrifying. And at number 2, Emplate. Emplate may not be as well known of a villain as our previous number, but he's arguably physically more frightening. Emplate is a mutant who physically looks like an emaciated corpse with purple artery-like veins running across his gray flesh. He is not a looker, that's for damn sure. Emplate first came to be in Generation X issue 1 back in 1994, and when his mutant powers first manifested, he was overcome with hunger and killed his mom because of it, causing his father to kick him out. Emplate, who back then was known as Marius St. Croix, sought out the dark arts out of a desire for more power. He would later be rejected by his sister as well, who he would magically trap inside of the form of a mute creature with razor-sharp diamond-hard skin, Penance. While he's only fought the X-Men a handful of times, his powers are not to be taken lightly. He has the ability to siphon mutant energy from bone marrow of mutants. If he siphons all of their energy, they die. While he's feeding from them, he cancels out their powers and often takes on some of his victims' attributes. If he feeds on them multiple times, he gains their powers permanently. So he's basically a mutant vampire. In addition to this, when he feeds, he achieves a measure of psychic control over his victims' minds, making them his subordinates. Scratch that, he is the mutant Dracula. And finally, in at number 1, the Shadow King. The Shadow King is one of Charles Xavier's consistent foes. He was a human mutant from Egypt with vast telepathic powers, which he used for evil, eventually taking on the alias of the Shadow King. Through retconning, he was made into an ancient evil entity. Aside from his bone-chilling appearance, this character scores the top spot on our list thanks to his possession abilities. While in the astral plane, he can possess other beings and control them. So he's basically like a monster out of a horror movie. He's an astral entity who preys on the bodies of highly skilled and powerful psychics, which he then uses to enslave others with. In the Shadow King's native form, he cannot be harmed physically, and he has lived for over a millennia. Generally, the Shadow King is depicted as a large creature with purplish skin, glowing red eyes, sharp claws, and even sharper teeth. Luckily, in order to exist in reality, the Shadow King needs a host, and if that host is killed, it will disperse the Shadow King's astral essence, which can take up to months or years for him to remanifest in his astral form again. Thank God. And at number 10, Barnacle. Barnacle was a character who first was introduced in 1999 in X-Men Magneto War issue 1. He's a mutant terrorist who has one of the nastiest powers, moisture solidification. He can initiate a chemical reaction that turns moisture into a solid shell, which he uses for various things. It can contain a person in a constructive turtle-like shell with their own bodily fluids, ew. He can create indestructible armor for himself, and he can spray a stream of hardened barnacle crust through the air, also ew, because it most likely comes from the moisture in his own body. Super gross. He once tried to screw with Storm and her claustrophobia by encasing her in a hardened shell, but luckily Nightcrawler was there to intervene. Dude is just flat out nasty. And at number 9, Deadbolt. Deadbolt is another smaller villain to make our list, and aesthetically is a very different kind of scary in comparison to our last number. Deadbolt is a living skeleton, contained with an energy field, who could remove pieces of his bones to use as a weapon. His body would immediately regenerate if he did, meaning I guess he's got an arsenal of bone weapons for eternity. He was member of the Dark Riders, an organization that worked for X-Men Big Bad Genesis. He was initially seemingly killed off by Wolverine, but later it was revealed that one of his fellow Dark Riders was the culprit behind his death. His skull is also split in half, creating devilish-like horns atop of his head. And he's definitely not the kind of villain I'd want to run into in the middle of the night, that's for damn sure.
Number 8. Grail. Grail is the villainous daughter of Darkseid, who also acts as an opposing force to Wonder Woman. She was kind of born to be Diana's rival, really. The two women were born at exactly the same time, and it was prophesied that Grail, the daughter of Darkseid and Myrna, would bring about much destruction. As such, she was almost killed as soon as she was born, but her mother protected her. She proved almost right away in the comics that she was a new villain worthy of our time when she made easy work of the Justice League. She and Diana ended up facing off shortly thereafter, with Grail immediately coming across as a promising and deadly new foe. Number 7. Hush. Hush has managed to pull off some of the most horrific schemes over the years, and gotten under Batman's skin many times. And Catwoman's skin. Literally in this case, when he ended up stealing her actual beating heart. Thomas Elliot is not only a powerful villain because of his intense vendetta against the Wayne family and Batman, but because he also is often shown to have the skill and the strength to match even Batman himself, as well as the cunning. In fact, in some cases, he might come across as even more cunning than Batman. He has taken Batman in hand-to-hand combat and fared surprisingly well, and he's managed to set into action motion outlandish plots like when he impersonated Bruce Wayne in an attempt to steal his life. Number 6. Granny Goodness. Her name might not make her sound terrifying, but Granny Goodness is not even close to as sweet as her name sounds. She became a trainer of Darkseid's soldiers after impressing him when she herself was selected to train and become one of his elite hounds. Those out there who are fans of Kingsman may find the story of how she was trained pretty familiar. During her training regimen, she was given a dog to train who stayed with her and progressed alongside her. Think you know where this is going. After bonding with the loyal doggo, who she named Mercy, she was later instructed to dispose of the dog. Goodness refused and instead disposed of her trainer. When Darkseid asked why she had done this, she revealed that Mercy was actually worth more than her trainer had been to Darkseid, as she had trained the dog to not only be loyal to her, but to Darkseid above her. Darkseid tested this theory by, tragically, ordering Mercy to attack and take out Goodness, and was impressed when he found the dog indeed obeyed him. Goodness then was forced to actually dispose of Mercy, but this act would inspire Darkseid to shape and use Granny Goodness as his most reliable trainer and recruiter of soldiers. That's one haunting origin story. Number 5. Brother Blood. Brother Blood is a pretty terrifying villain, to be honest. He can control his victim's mind if he ends up acquiring his victim's blood. And that isn't just all. Getting their blood, there is a whole slew of powers he can exert over you. In the current continuity, Brother Blood can use the blood of his enemies to heal, rip open teleportation portals, and even project energy. Oh, and he also gains the powers of those whose blood he has tasted. Ugh. And of course, once he has your blood, he can also use it to control you, bending you to his will and making you do his bidding. Not only does that mean you are in danger of losing your own free will if you go up against him, but it also means you have to deal with all his servants who have already done so. He also happens to be a weirdly likable guy, so it's pretty easy for him to attract new willing followers to his cause. Currently in the comics, Brother Blood is even using his charismatic personality to present himself as a now redeemed villain, intent on helping to find a new planet for those who join his cause to live on in response to the global climate crisis that the world is experiencing. But we'll have to wait and see if this redemption is actually the real deal or not. I'm not buying it so far, and I'm really excited for when Brother Blood is like, I am a villain the whole time I've been a villain. Yes. Number 4. Darkseid. Darkseid has to be one of the most fearsome villains out there. He is not only the ruler of Apocalypse with an army at his back, but he also has some of the most ruthless, cruel, and elite soldiers in the cosmos. Darkseid has fought and defeated many heroes in the past, even seemingly at one point permanently defeating Batman, although Batman would return and be revealed to have not been permanently taken out actually. Darkseid is terrifying because he is inevitable, best summed up by 2 words. Darkseid is. Number 3. Perpetua. Perpetua is an old evil, but one that we didn't know of in the comics until 2018, when she was first introduced in Justice League Volume 4, issue number 8. Perpetua quickly became known as one of the greatest evils the universe or multiverse had ever known. She was the creator basically of all things, and the mother to the Anti-Monitor, World Forger, and Over-Monitor. She pretty much embodies the dark multiverse in a way. Well, her, I guess, and the Batman who laughs, who comes from the dark multiverse. She is known for being one of the most powerful beings in the multiverse and is considered an Omega-level cosmic entity, basically an evil goddess who is fueled by crisis energy and aims to use it to destroy and rebuild the entire multiverse. Number 2. Batman Who Laughs. Although he may currently be defeated in the comics, make no mistake that the Batman Who Laughs remains one of the most terrifying characters to come out of DC Comics' dark multiverse. Batman Who Laughs hails from the Earth of -22 and is a version of Bruce Wayne who ended up being turned insane by exposure to the Joker venom. This version of Bruce killed all of his fellow Bat family members except for Damian, who he instead recruited to join him. Batman Who Laughs would serve Barbatos, the Bat God, and go on to assemble an army of Dark Knights for him from across the dark multiverse to join him in reshaping and conquering all of reality. From there, he would ally himself with Perpetua and would even go on to betray her, revealing the whole time that he sought to conquer the multiverse himself, so he might reshape it in his own image, becoming one of the most feared villains in all of DC's history. Number 1. Upside Down Man. While not officially stated as such, the Upside Down Man is kind of godlike in his appearance in DC Comics. He is the dark reflection of Hecate, who is quite dark herself, so that is honestly saying something. And she is considered to be a goddess and powerful witch, so I think we can consider him to be at a god level, and of course Upside Down Man is also a powerful magic user who seeks to invade and devour the Prime Earth reality after being trapped for millennia in the dark multiverse with the other kind, banished there by Hecate, or Hecate, whatever you prefer. Number 10. Jane Doe. Jane Doe is a mass taker of lives who served time at Arkham Asylum. She appears to not have any skin of her own, with muscle tissue fully exposed, making her one of the most frightening villains to look at on our list, that is for sure. Instead of wearing her own skin, she covets the skin and lives of others. While she doesn't appear to have any specific superpowers, it has been implied that she might be capable of shapeshifting. She often gets to know her victims before taking their lives and adopting their identities, sometimes even wearing their preserved skin as a suit. Ew. Instead of simply using makeup to disguise herself. I mean, honestly, I don't think you should be putting makeup on exposed muscle tissue anyways. That seems like a good way to, I don't know, get an infection or something. I don't even know how Jane Doe has lived like this actually, if she really is as she appears to be. Even with her not wearing makeup and just wearing, I guess, skin suits. I don't know, still seems like it shouldn't be possible, especially if she doesn't have powers. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9. Zonas. You might know about Darkseid, who belongs to the new gods, but do you know about Zonas, who belongs to the old gods? After all, for there to be new gods, there have to have been old gods, right? Zonas is one of the old gods and is in fact believed to have been the last old god. He was known as the god of evil, or Yuga Khan. At one point, he wielded anti-life, claiming that it was what allowed him to resurrect the old gods, and he is believed to be the original being to first wield Omega beams. Zonas ended up being trapped in the source, and even after escaping the prison and attempting to destroy all of creation, was defeated and imprisoned there once again.
Number 8. Lord Armageddon. The warlord of an alien race called the Trojan. Armageddon led his armies to numerous victories against several worlds in his efforts to expand his empire. He was so consumed with this expansion that he didn't notice when his wife died giving birth to his twin sons. When one of his twins was murdered by Atalanta, the surviving son fell in love with her and decided to try and marry her, and kidnapped her, bringing her back to his homeworld. Lord Armageddon supported this, and when Hulk and the Silver Surfer came to try and rescue Atalanta, Armageddon managed to incapacitate both the heroes. When his son Trauma fell on a broken piece of armor and died, he asked his father to give the heroes and his beloved safe passage home. Armageddon later tried to bring his son back to life, but the machine he was using was destroyed by Hulk. Although this earned the Hulk Armageddon's respect, it also also caused him to vow revenge on the Hulk. I think anyone who is so obsessed with interstellar domination and who can fight the Hulk and the Silver Surfer is pretty scary, but mostly just because of how much raw power they are dealing with. So if this were a video ranking the powers of the villains, perhaps he would be higher on this list. Number 7. Harpy. After longtime Hulk love interest Betty Ross's husband was seemingly killed in a rescue mission gone wrong, she suffered a nervous breakdown. MODOK learned of this and pumped her full of gamma radiation, hoping to create a creature that could go toe-to-toe with the Hulk. The gamma rays gave Betty wings, talons, and the ability to shoot dangerous rays from her hands, and she became the insane creature known as Harpy. As stated before, Bruce Banner was able to use Beast's tech to save her, and Betty would go on to marry Bruce, die, and then come back to life as the Red She-Hulk, before further mutating into the Red Harpy, who is more of an ally to the Hulk than an enemy. Harpy has a scary look, no doubt, but what I find scary about her is more so the idea of the person Hulk loves more than anything becoming a monster that wants him dead. Having to then fight her and deal with the fact that even if he wins the fight, he's just hurt Betty. It adds a certain level of dread and nuance that you don't get with a lot of the other villains. Number 6. Absorbing Man. After the death of his mother, Carl Creel's father became abusive towards him, eventually kicking him out to live on the street when he eventually tried to fight back. In order to survive, Creel engaged in petty theft to support himself while building his career as a boxer. Creel eventually became an enforcer for the Owl before getting arrested. While serving his sentence, he was chosen by Loki to be a pawn in one of his schemes against Thor. Loki spiked the inmate's water with Asgardian herbs that granted him the power to absorb the properties of any element he touched. He used his powers to absorb the powers and properties of Mjolnir, Thor's magical hammer, and was able to successfully take on the God of Thunder, although he was eventually defeated in a rematch. Absorbing Man went on to battle many heroes, including the Hulk, who he was hired to kill by an evil organization called They Who Wield Power. Although this didn't work, he did tangle with the Hulk a few other times, such as when they fought on Easter Island, and Absorbing Man absorbed the island in hopes of taking over the world. I didn't include Absorbing Man in the first video because he has fought so many Marvel heroes that it's hard to call him a Hulk villain. However, he is a major player in the Immortal Hulk series, so let's go with it. In this series, he was given an injection of Hulk Plug, which turned him red and let him absorb gamma radiation. He fought the Hulk and inadvertently absorbed the demonic being known as the One Below All. This gave Creel a very painful looking and significantly more terrifying appearance, and caused him, Hulk, and all the members of Gamma Flight to be transported to the Demon's Realm. Creel helped stop the One Below All and was offered a spot on Gamma Flight by Puck, where he currently works as a hero rather than a villain. Number 5. Glob. When a prisoner named Joe Timms learned that the love of his life was dying, Joe decided to escape prison in order to see her one last time. Unfortunately for him, he drowned in the swamp near the prison before he could make it back to her. Years later, the Hulk was disposing of a barrel of radioactive waste, and in a move that I'm sure the EPA would be horrified by, threw it into the swamp. The waste revived Timms and transformed his body into the deformed gloopy mess you see before you. Because she seemingly just can't catch a break, Betty Ross was mistaken by the Glob for his lost love. This caused Glob to kidnap her and for the Hulk to go after him. As a creature of goop, the Hulk was unable to damage him with his fists, and if he hadn't been destroyed by the same radioactive waters that spawned him, Hulk may have been out of luck. Glob was later reformed by the leader and has tangled with the Hulk a few times in the years since. Speaking of which, number 4, the leader. Samuel Stearns was a man of below average intelligence who was working at a chemical plant when one of the canisters of waste he was moving broke open and doused him in the toxic waste. On the plus side, rather than giving him cancer, it gave him super intelligence. On the flip side, it also caused his head to grow to a massive size and for his skin to turn green. Stearns decided to dedicate himself to taking over the world and started calling himself the leader. Now, there is no doubt that the leader is one of Hulk's greatest foes, if not the greatest of them. I mean, it's either him or Abomination. A lot of you were shocked at him being left left off of part 1 of this list, and honestly, my reasoning was that the leader isn't especially scary compared to the other villains he recruits for his schemes against the Hulk. However, considering the amount of horrifying plots he is responsible for, combined with how disturbing the character was in his run in Immortal Hulk when he grew to giant size and attacked the Hulk with tendrils, I'm happy to include him here. While we're on the subject, I'm currently working on a video about the Immortal Hulk for our Attempting to Explain series, so keep an eye out for that in the coming weeks. Number 3, Madman. Coming in at the number 3 slot, we actually have the leader's brother, Philip Stearns. Phil was a student at Caltech at the same time as Bruce Banner. Although brilliant in his own right, he was jealous of Bruce's superior intellect and developed an obsession with his classmate. When Bruce became the Hulk, this infatuation became dangerous, as Phil started experimenting on himself with gamma radiation in order to try and be more like his favorite hero. Not only did this result in Stearns becoming a super strong, deformed monster, but it caused what was left of his sanity to snap, and him to develop multiple personality disorder. Although he initially tried to kill the Hulk, he later changed his mind, deciding to remain a villain, but to not kill Hulk, as life would be too boring without him to annoy. Now, the idea of a Hulk who has developed DID and is obsessed with Bruce Banner and the Hulk is pretty disturbing, and is frightening enough that the leader actually once teamed up with the Hulk to defeat him, confessing to Hulk that he is scared of Madman. Although years later, leader would eventually kill his brother in Thunderbolts Volume 2, Issue 6. Number 2, Zenu. This fluffy beast is an alien with the power to hypnotize people on a mass scale who crash-landed on Earth. He planned on using his hypnotic powers to make the people of Earth build him a new ship in order to return to his home planet, despite the fact that the force of the rocket would tear the Earth apart. Although this plan failed, Zenu did eventually make his way back to his home planet, where he discovered that everyone had died of disease. He returned to Earth, where he was engaged in many schemes to use his hypnotism to take over the planet. He has fought a lot of heroes such as Namor, Iron Man, and Deadpool, but he seems to hate the Hulk the most. In one of his more creative schemes, he tricked the Hulk into defeating a monster, causing a wave of parasites to be unleashed on nearby civilians. Zenu then showed up and stopped the parasites and implanted false memories in all the witnesses' minds of him being a hero. He continued to use these powers to turn public opinion against the Hulk before Hulk eventually defeated him. When killed, Zenu can reform his body by taking over someone else's body and gradually transforming it into his. As if that wasn't bad enough, he has developed a taste for humans and regularly consumes them in brutal and terrifying ways. Number 1, the One Below All. So the One Above All is the ruler of the multiverse and the creator of all life in it. Although he is the source of love and good, he also has an evil form known as the One Below All, who is the personification of hatred and destruction. The ruler of the lowest point of reality, the below place, it is able to manifest itself on Earth through the mutagenic form of gamma radiation. This means that when Bruce Banner was caught in the gamma bomb, he was infused with this dark entity's power. The One Below All wants to become the only remaining thing in the multiverse and destroy everything else. As he is incapable of having his own personality without a host, it waited until Hulk's father, Brian Banner, died to merge with him and take on his personality, which, if you know the character or watched part 1 of this video, you know is a really bad thing. The leader eventually managed to absorb Brian's soul in hopes of learning more about the One Below All, but was possessed by the One Below All. It's hard to say which actions to count as the One Below Alls and which to count as Brian Banner or the leaders, but his influence is undeniably horrible and worthy of the top spot on this list.
Number 10, the Maker. The Maker is one of the creepiest villains out there, but at the same time, he also seems like one of the saddest as well, at least at the beginning of Ultimate Invasion. And honestly, there are undertones of that throughout, I would say, the Ultimate continuity for him. Who is the Maker? He's the version of Reed Richards who we normally know as Mr. Fantastic, who hails from the reality of Earth 1610, known as the Ultimate or Ultimates reality. What makes him so scary? Perhaps the realization that Reed potentially makes an even more formidable villain than he does a hero. He's like Reed without the moral code. I mean, he is Reed without the moral code. That's literally who he is. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that subscribe. And make sure you have that bell on so you don't miss out on any of our good old nerdy notifications. Number 9. Reavers. Over the years, the Reavers have become scarier and scarier as a group of villains. Initially, the Reavers were members of the Hellfire Club, in a way belonging to the Hellfire Club's elite team of bodyguards, their own personal militia known as the Hellfire Knight. After being taken by Mojo and repurposed, they were turned into cyborgs, who have become more and more horrific as the years have progressed in terms of their appearance. The Reavers would go on to become affiliated with Spiral, Lady Deathstrike, and of course Donald Pierce. Initially, they just look like eccentric 80s and 90s villains, but in the modern age, they look more like mad science experiments gone wrong, with the weapons that they wield becoming integrated with their own bodies, a part of that. Before, they were some of my favorite comedic relief in terms of comic book villains, and now they're more like nightmare fuel.
Number 8. Zax. The first of a few energy drainers on this list, Zax was formed when a group of villains tried to plant a bomb at a nuclear energy plant. Rather than causing an explosion, this caused the energy in the plant's pylon to gain sentience, incinerating the villains and absorbing their intelligence. Zax then went on a rampage, destroying everything and everyone in its path in order to gain as much intelligence as possible. In his first appearance, Zax destroyed several city blocks in the course of a few minutes, killing untold numbers of people and growing 40 feet tall before being confronted by the Hulk. As if that wasn't scary enough, it has also been revealed that incinerating people and stealing their psionic energy is a physically pleasurable experience for the monster. So Zax isn't just killing to gain strength and power, he's also doing it because it feels good. Number 7. Piecemeal. Piecemeal was once a normal man until he was captured and killed by the Red Skull, who wanted to use his body for an evil experiment. The Red Skull's scientists replaced several of his limbs and extremities, turning him into a terrifying beast. Piecemeal eventually escaped from the Red Skull's island and made his way to the mainland with no memories of his previous life. Piecemeal is obviously a pretty scary looking dude, and his superhuman strength and ability to shoot energy blasts make him a formidable foe, but these are not the things that make him terrifying. As he has no memories of his life, Piecemeal wants to experience as much of the spectrum of human emotion as possible. He does this by triggering the emotions of people and then touching them to absorb their emotions and memories, not stopping until the victim is a worn-out husk. One of the ways he triggers people's emotions is by transforming his face to look like them, putting them into a state of shock. He wanted to absorb the Hulk's rage, but was instead impaled and thrown into Loch Ness. This was thought to be the end of the villainous monster, but when the Hulk searched the loch, he could find no body. Was Piecemeal eaten by the Loch Ness monster? Or is he still wandering the earth, draining victims? Number 6. The Quinonic Man. The Quinonic Man is an exosuit that was developed to be piloted by 5 men trained to act as one. Although originally developed for space exploration, it was instead used to battle the Hulk in Incredible Hulk number 213, even managing to beat the Hulk in that issue. While this isn't particularly scary, what puts the Quinonic Man on this list is its later appearance in Indestructible Hulk number 3. In this story, AIM is attempting to reactivate the Quinonic Man for their own nefarious purposes. In order to accomplish this, they reassemble the original 5 pilots. The only issue? 4 of them are dead. Thankfully for AIM, they are able to use electrochemical technology to ensure that the Quinonic Man still has psionic access to the dead pilot's skills and reflexes and can thus use the dead body's muscle memories to control the robot. In layman's terms, this means that the Hulk is being attacked by a robot full of corpses, which is equal parts scary and disturbing. The Quinonic Man puts up quite a struggle against the Hulk, but it meets its end when Hulk pushes it into a volcano. Number 5. Red Hulk. After the death of his daughter at the hands of the Abomination, longtime Hulk enemy Thunderbolt Ross fell into a deep depression that was only worsened by a perceived lack of purpose after the Hulk was shipped off-world in the Planet Hulk storyline. He was approached by MODOK and the Leader, who convinced him to join their evil super team, the Intelligentsia. During the events of World War Hulk, they managed to siphon energy off of the Hulk and transfer it into Ross, transforming him into the Red Hulk. Red Hulk has all of Ross's smarts as well as his legendary temper, but lacks Hulk's compassion, making him a dangerous and terrifying enemy. With the help of a life model decoy, Ross was able to hide his Red Hulk identity for some time, continuing to work for the government while still going on missions for the Intelligentsia. Number 4. Abomination. Emil Blonsky was a communist spy who was working undercover at the same military base as Bruce Banner, working to sabotage the Gamma experiments so that US forces would not become more advanced than the communists. When a distraught Bruce Banner tried to take his own life with a gamma machine in his lab, Blonsky was there spying on the professor. When Bruce's self-harm attempt was interrupted and he was taken away, Blonsky was hit by the gamma radiation instead. Like Banner, Blonsky had a strange genetic variation that caused the gamma rays to transform him into the Abomination. Abomination is able to retain his human intelligence and is actually stronger than the Hulk unless the Hulk reaches a state of total enragement. Unlike Banner, Abomination is thrilled with his new form and regularly goes on rampages, killing entire towns. He considers Hulk his equal, as both are disfigured and alone, but when he learned that Bruce had married his longtime sweetheart Betty Ross, he was enraged at the idea that the Hulk was happier than him. In a move of sociopathic pettiness, when Betty was hospitalized, Blonsky injected his blood into her dialysis machine, killing her with gamma poisoning. Number 3. Half-Life. In an origin not dissimilar to the Hulk's, Tony Masterson was an ordinary college professor until he was exposed to a gamma bomb. This turned Masterson into essentially a living corpse who only comes alive at night. He uses his vampiric powers to drain his victim's life force with his touch. When he touches a gamma-powered character, such as the Hulk, he drains their powers rather than their life force. In his first appearance in Incredible Hulk number 334, he tried to drain the Hulk's powers, hoping that they would give him enough life force to be able to stay alive during the day, but Hulk managed to defeat him, ripping his arms off. To the Hulk's shock, Half-Life was still able to use his arms despite them not being attached. He was later given a titanium battlesuit by the leader and very nearly destroyed the Jade Giant, but because he overused his powers in doing so, he ended up in a mummified coma. Number 2. The Wendigo. The Wendigo is a figure from indigenous folklore that was first adapted to Marvel Comics in Incredible Hulk number 162. The curse of the Wendigo is something that happens when a person engages in cannibalism in the Canadian wilderness. The curse causes the person to transform into a vicious creature who has an insatiable hunger for human flesh. In its first comics appearance, the Wendigo is a man named Paul Cartier who goes on a hunting trip with his friends Georges Baptiste and Henri Clouzot. When they are attacked by wolves, the trio are forced to hide in a cave where Henri dies. After 4 days trapped in the cave with no supplies, Georges wakes up and finds Paul eating his friend's remains, inadvertently giving himself the Wendigo curse. Over the years, Wendigo and Hulk clashed several times before Paul's friend Georges managed to transfer the curse to himself, freeing his friend and becoming the second Wendigo. This Wendigo was eventually defeated by Alpha Flight with the help of Wolverine and Nightcrawler. In the years since, several different Wendigos have cropped up in Marvel's Canadian wilderness, each more dangerous than the last. Number 1. Brian Banner. Bruce Banner's father, Brian, is scary because he is all too real. After being abused by his own father, Brian vowed to never have children. Although an accomplished scientist, Brian struggled with alcoholism and anger issues, and when his wife became pregnant and gave birth to Bruce, he became abusive to both of them. This culminated one Christmas when his wife tried to take Bruce and leave, and Brian killed her. Brian was put in a mental institute as a result until he was released 15 years later. During a confrontation between Bruce and Brian at his mother's grave, the two got into a fight, and Bruce accidentally killed his father. Bruce repressed this memory and spent the next several years believing that his father had been killed in a robbery. As if that weren't bad enough, Bruce was haunted by the ghost of his abusive father until he confronted his father in hell during a period of death in Incredible Hulk 460. Brian is the source of most of Bruce's fears, which proved to be most unfortunate when he was resurrected in the Chaos War as a hybrid of the Devil Hulk and the Guilt Hulk, a dangerous and powerful being who fed off of his son's fear. When that failed and Brian died again, he gained the ability to possess gamma mutates using his influence to control several characters, including Jailbait, Sasquatch, the Absorbing Man, and even the Hulk himself. Even before gaining hellish powers, Brian Banner was the villain that both Bruce Banner and the Hulk were most afraid of. The fact that he now has the ability to control some of Hulk's allies and turn them against him makes him all the more frightening.
Number 10. Norman Norman Osborne. Norman Osborne wasn't always a villain, but many things in his life shaped him to become the greedy, insane, and focused, iconic Spider-Man nemesis we know him as today. It all started when Norman was young. Hearing that his parents were having financial issues, he learned at a young age that it was important to look out for number one above all others to ensure his own survival. Number one is Norman Osborne, by the way. His father mistreated him and was known as a failure, and this drove young Norman to strive to do better than his old man, striving for excellence in all things at any cost. When his wife died, it only served to inspire Norman to throw himself into his work even more. He cut out his business partner and began searching for formulas that he could profit off of, ending up discovering and creating the Goblin Serum, which made him smarter and stronger, but at the cost of his sanity. Number 9, Harley Quinn. More of a psychological horror story as well. Harley Quinn ended up losing her sanity and parts of herself in her love of the Joker. It was her love for him that drove her to a life of crime and made her the villain initially that she became. She's now since found a way out of this darkness, dumped the Joker, and even moved more towards becoming a hero, even teaming up with Batman as his newest sidekick. But you can't deny how dark her origins were. In the limited series Harleen, we get a more sexy version of her fall into a life of crime and a fall into her love for the Joker. But even that shows just how much Harley spiraled down into the beautiful and freeing pit of insanity with Mr. J. It also tells us a tale of her being trapped in Arkham Asylum during a breakout with various villains around every corner, and not all of them are friendly towards Dr. Quinzel. In the end, she is forced to choose between the two sides of herself and ends up shattering into complete insanity after killing a security guard who she kind of considered to be her friend, turning away from her saner persona of Dr. Quinzel and fully becoming and embodying Harley Quinn. I just love too that the panel is like literally her shattering. Number 8, Mistress Death. What is one of the greatest fears that most people have? Death, of course. The end of life and the journey into the unknown. I think we're the most afraid of death because we just don't really know what comes next. It is the end of something, which honestly already tends to scare us humans, just the idea of something ending, but it also represents a massive change for us, moving from the realm of the living to the non-living, and whatever comes after that, if anything does at all. Hence, Mistress Death has to be one of the most terrifying villains we have at Marvel Comics. Now, granted, Mistress Death isn't really a straight up villain. She's less of a villain and more of like a concept. Everything must die, and we've also seen what the world would be like without her doing her job. See Marvel's Cancerverse. Yeah, not so pretty. But at the same time, the idea of death still scares us, and although she isn't really taking life maliciously, it's easy to see her as a villain when she preys on the fears of so many in the Marvel multiverse, and the fears of us as readers in the real world too. Number 7, Malice. When it comes to Malice, I think the reason why she scares me so much is my fear of possession. I just think of Malice taking over people's bodies, making heroes perform as they normally would not, and I'm honestly terrified of that. Malice has been a few different people in the comics, and I'm not sure if we've ever really clarified if they were the same entity or not as some of the other Malices that we've had. There is Malice as in Alice McAllister, who can exist as a purely psionic being and has done so in the past, possessing various X-Men members such as Lorna Dane, Psylocke, and even Storm for a time. And there is Malice as in the darker persona of Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, which takes control of the Invisible Woman and who apparently was made manifest during the Psycho Man's attack on New York. Pretty sure these are two separate entities, but I think it's also really interesting that they both kind of like possess people and they're also both named Malice, so I just decided to include them together because you never know. You never know. Those could be connected at some point. Number 6, Doramu. When it comes to ghoulies that exist less in the physical world and more in other dimensions, Doramu is one of the folks who really reigns supreme. Why is Doramu one of the most horrifying villains Marvel has to offer? Probably because he's just so darn powerful. Also, we don't call him the Dread Dormammu, the Dread Lord Dormammu, for nothing. He rules the dark dimension, which he conquered, and he isn't afraid to mess you up in honestly really terrible ways. I feel like being killed by Dormammu or his forces would actually be a mercy, considering all the terrible ways I've seen him torment his foes, both in the comics and honestly, outside of them as well. Number 5, Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova just creeps me out, even just to look at her. Often the way she is drawn is what disturbs me the most, but at the same time, she is drawn in a way that makes sense when you consider just how terrifying she is from a power set standpoint and in regards to how twisted her mind is. I feel like we draw her like how she is on the inside. She's like really creepy on the outside, and it's representing what she's got going inside, you know what I mean? Which is really creepy and really gross. Cassandra Nova doesn't often think twice when it comes to pulling off unspeakable acts of horror. She will turn you inside out if she feels she needs to, or simply just if she wants to. And honestly, she can do that. At least from a psionic standpoint, and maybe even from a physical standpoint too. There's a few things that have happened, not quite sure what happened with her, but I was creepy and I don't want it to happen to me, I'll tell you that much. Cassandra Nova is one of the most powerful telepaths and psionic characters we have in Marvel Comics, and she just so happens to be a villain, usually, who until recently didn't even possess a sense of empathy. So, this has led her to slaughter millions without even batting an eye. In fact, she's probably less likely to blink and more likely to stare intently while she does this, as she laughs maniacally afterward. Number 4, Galactus. Have you seen Galactus? I don't think I need to justify why he's so scary. So instead, I'm just gonna talk a bit about the time that he took on Dazzler as one of his heralds. This was also a pretty scary time for me as a reader, because during that whole issue, during that whole story, I was wondering if Dazzler would ever get to go back home to Earth to continue to pursue her career as a singer. Seriously, when Dazzler goes on these wacky adventures in the comics, I'm always left worrying about if she's missing singing gigs back home. I'm like, is there a concert going on right now? Like, will she ever recover her career? No, but in all seriousness, Galactus is scary not just because he is gigantic, though honestly there is also that pretty terrifying, especially scary for those who have megalophobia, a fear of gigantic things. He's also scary because in many ways he is inevitable. Although I believe Galactus is still currently deceased in the comics, it has been implied and stated on multiple occasions in the past that his existence is necessary for the cosmos to be in balance and continue on forward, implying that even when he's gone, we have to deal with the fear of what might happen to the universe and even perhaps the multiverse in his absence, which is now. Number 3, Tarn the Uncaring. Just thinking about Tarn sends shivers down my spine. Tarn is or was one of the Iraqi mutants. He was kinda like the Araco version of Krakoa's Mr. Sinister, except that Tarn is an Omega level mutant who also has magic-based powers as well. Tarn's powers are mainly psionic in nature, granting him the ability to read minds while also causing immense pain to his target. Not only is he telepathic, but he's also an immensely powerful telekinetic as well. Like Mr. Sinister, he is obsessed with evolution and genes, and is capable of altering the genetic makeup of other mutants, even taking their powers away or simply malforming them to the point that they can no longer function. The Locust Vile are what Tarn calls his loyal servants, who see him basically as a god. These Iraqi mutants are Tarn's experiments. While most don't survive his experimentation process, the ones who do worship him as their god and join his Locust Vile. Tarn also has the ability to teleport too, so he could just like pop up beside you and then literally turn you into a pile of painful goo. Pretty scary stuff. Number 2, Null. Null is basically the biggest, baddest symbiote around. Yeah, you thought Venom was scary? You thought Carnage was scary? Well, I mean, you're right. Both of those symbiotic characters are pretty scary. But without Null, neither would even exist, so think about that. Null is the god of symbiotes and also wields a symbiotic army complete with symbiotic dragons as well. I mean, yeah. Number 1, the Many-Angled Ones, aka Marvel's version of the Elder Gods, or at least one of their versions, I would say. What could be scarier in any reality, honestly? Yep, Marvel also has their own Elder Gods who have been known sometimes as the Many-Angled Ones. What do the Many-Angled Ones get up to? Well, when they invade the reality known as Earth 10011, they warp it into something horrifically twisted. After they have influenced and invaded this reality successfully, death is eliminated and life runs rampant and unchecked, with many prominent figures in this reality pledging themselves to the Many-Angled Ones. And if you think that eliminating death would be a good thing, just check out this universe. We'd come to know this reality as the Cancerverse. For a while, the Many-Angled Ones and the Cancerverse actually threatened the entire multiverse, attempting at first to invade Earth 616, which is our main comic book continuity. Fortunately, they did not succeed in their attempt, but if they had, That should be like a what if issue. What if they did that? Does that exist? If it exists, let me know what issue it is so I can look it up and read it.
Number 10. Legion. Legion, aka David Haller, is the son of Charles Xavier and Gabriel Haller. He first debuted back in 1985 in New Mutants number 25. He is an extremely powerful mutant. Legion has a whole host of abilities, too many to name almost. Chief amongst them, telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, reality warping, and so much more. The only thing, David's not really fully in control of his powers. An Omega level mutant, when his powers first manifested, it was during a terrorist situation, and he actually ended up absorbing the mind of the lead terrorist, Jamal Tarami, which led to his mind splintering and him developing multiple personalities, each of whom controlled a different aspect of his powers. Legion started off as a villain of the X-Men, as he was quickly possessed by the Shadow King, as he was rendered catatonic shortly after his first true manifestation of power. David is also responsible for the Age of Apocalypse timeline, when he went back in time attempting to kill Magneto but killed his father instead, creating that horrifying branch of reality. Part of what made Legion so dangerous was his insanity and unpredictability as a result. However, over the years, David has metamorphosized into somewhat of a hero and has gained more control over his powers, partially through training and partially through tech. However, with a character like Legion, there's always the potential that his grip on his personalities could slip, and he could find himself a menace to the X-Men and the world once more. Also, watch Legion on FX, it's great. Number 9. Danger. Danger is the manifestation and personification of the Danger Room. Now, even if one is only casually acquainted with the X-Men, they most likely know of the Danger Room, the training space that pits the X-Men against all kinds of, well, dangerous obstacles to hone their skills. However, what they may not be aware of is this plot. Due to lots of backstory, Xavier found himself updating the Danger Room with Shi'ar tech. However, as he did, it posed him a question. Where am I? This led Charles to realize the room was sentient. However, he also needed a space for the X-Men to train, so he decided the best thing to do was cover it up and tell no one. The Danger Room was then utilized and destroyed when the mansion was attacked, the various times that's happened. And after one such time, Danger began to seize control of the other machines in an attempt to escape and forge a body. First, Danger coaxed a student to suicide, then managed to build a female body, take on and defeat the X-Men in her quest to kill her father, Xavier. Danger spent years seeking revenge, building new bodies or possessing others, like the Omega Sentinel. She was made all the more dangerous by her intimate knowledge of the team's weaknesses and fighting styles. However, ultimately this character became an ally to the X-Men. Sometimes you just gotta get over all that dark stuff Xavier does when writers want to introduce conflict into the story. That's how it goes. No matter how scary you are, turn good, you get bumped down the list.
Number 8. Prince Zuko. Okay, so while this might not be a comic book character, I still find Zuko of Avatar to have one of the most traumatic and horrifying stories out there, and I also just like Prince Zuko, so I want to talk about it. Not only that, but he's just a great villain because a lot of the reasoning behind who he is also helps to justify what he does, and makes him a better villain because of that. And that makes him a better villain. A great villain in my mind needs to have a motivation that you can actually connect with. Their need to do something that goes against every moral code that they have learned or that society has to feel justified to the point that you may even feel bad for them at times, or even find yourself rooting for them. After all, we aren't born villainous. It's usually a sense of injustice that makes us feel we have no other option but to break the rules, tear down the establishment, and question our own morals in order to get done what we need done. You have to be pushed to the brink to get to the point that you actually shift into a villain in reality, and Zuko definitely was that. A lot of what he does is out of wanting to win back his father's love, and because he is understandably afraid of his father as well. He became a villain as a result of his punishment at the hands of his father, where he was burned in a forced duel against him, and then later exiled as well. Number 7. Carnage. Even before Cletus Cassidy was Carnage, he was terrifying, and the villain only has become more terrifying ever since then. Cletus was born into a family with a history of mental health problems, and from a young age it seemed as though there was always something off about him. It's like he was destined to become a villain. He showed all the expectant signs of becoming a psychotic, sociopathic serial killer, and, well, that's just what happened. He was raised by a woman who we can only assume was his grandmother, as his mother died seemingly from childbirth. He was also born in Ravencroft, so I feel like that is some kind of foreboding as to what type of child he could grow up to be. His supposed grandmother mistreated him while raising him, and he paid her back in kind by pushing her down the stairs. Yikes! From there, he went to live with a family who is believed to have been his biological father and his stepmother, though I don't think that's ever really confirmed. that also didn't end well. Roscoe, his apparent dad, mistreated him as well, and his stepmother ended up dead, caught in the middle of the conflict. Roscoe was arrested because of her death, and Cletus ended up at an orphanage. While there, he unleashed his wrath on fellow orphans and administrators, even killing a few outright, and eventually burned the orphanage to the ground. Seriously, this is just something out of a horror movie. Number 6. The Broken. I don't know why, but this villain's tale just always sticks with me for some reason. No matter what, I just think it's that initial panel of Batman's like head and torso together, which is like separated from the rest of his body, but suspended with like thick coiled wires, and he's in immense pain, that really does it for me. It just is like, I don't know, I just think it's so scary. The Broken is an alternate version of Batman who comes from the dark multiverse. He appeared in the retelling of Nightfall, where instead of Batman winning the day on his Earth, he lost in the fight to reclaim Gotham against Azrael, who he'd appointed as his replacement after Bane broke his back. Azrael won and became Gotham's protector, Saint Batman, and Bruce became his permanent prisoner. His limbs were removed from his body, but he was kept alive, just as like a head and a torso, kept in immense pain on what I assume is like a life support machine, but also kind of a torture device. He suffered intense migraines and seizures while kept this way. Eventually, he was freed by Bane's son and escaped Saint Batman, taking back Gotham, but this entire experience left him broken, turning him into an even worse villain than Saint Batman was. So he like reclaims the city, but you're like, oh no, oh dear. Not good. Number 5, Superman. Wait a minute, what? Superman isn't a villain. Well, not in the main continuity, but in the alternate reality of Injustice, he most certainly is a villain. How did this come about? Well, after Superman was tricked into fighting Doomsday, only to realize he had been made to hallucinate by the Joker and Harley, who used fear toxin on him. What had actually been happening was that Superman had been fighting Lois Lane, not his nemesis Doomsday. He realizes this all too late, sadly, as he discovers he has killed Lois. Not only that, but she was pregnant. And not only that, but the Joker and Harley had also tied a trigger for a nuclear explosion to Lois's heart. As a result, when her heart stopped, Metropolis, Superman's shining city, was blown to bits. It's really no wonder he became such a cold and deadly villain. He felt that he needed to fix the world as a result of these events. Of course, he went about that in a way that I'm sure Lois would not have been proud of had she still been alive to see Superman fight in her and Metropolis's name. Number 4, Killer Frost. Killer Frost was originally scientist Caitlin Snow, who had been on the hunt for a perpetual motion energy conducting machine that many believed to be a myth. She sought to continue the research of Dr. Louise Lincoln, who had been working to make such a machine, which she called a self-sustaining thermodynamic ultraconductor engine. Caitlin's colleagues warned her against following in Dr. Lincoln's footsteps, but she paid them no mind. When she finished the engine, they turned on her, revealing their true colors. They were actually working for the evil organization known as Hive, and sought to destroy Snow and Lincoln's work, preventing the invention from ever being used or discovered. They trapped Caitlin within the engine and started it up in order to destroy her. Terrified, Caitlin panicked and tore out the wires for the coolant system. This had an unexpected result, and Caitlin Snow found herself bonded with ice and basically became a heat vampire. With her new ice-based powers, she escaped and killed all of the Hive agents. Craving heat as a result of her condition, she would later discover that exposure to Firestorm's powers temporarily reverted her to normal and would dedicate her life to pursuing him, seeking a permanent cure. Number 3, Zombie Spider-Man. I know he's another alternate hero turned villain, but what can I say? They get some of the spookiest origins because they kind of have the most to lose. Heroes have usually higher stakes than villains. When it comes to Spider-Man's origins in the zombieverse, he was of course infected with the zombie virus, which made him a villain. But as this change came upon him, he found himself tragically and horrifyingly feeding on his own family members that he tried desperately for years to keep safe. Spider-Man started off his brain and flesh-eating spree by eating those he'd loved the most in a horrific twist. He devoured Mary Jane and his Aunt May, likely crying all the while, I imagine, but unable to stop himself. He was just so hungry. Number 2, Bane. It's really no surprise that Bane became a supervillain considering he grew up in prison, serving time for crimes he did not commit, but that his father committed. Bane's father was a revolutionary who had escaped the prison, and when Bane was just 17, he was imprisoned in his father's place. He spent most of his life inside a cell that was connected to the ocean. All day he would spend in mind-numbing seclusion, alone in his cell, and at night he would have to swim for his life while trying to stay afloat above the water that filled up his prison cell almost to the very top, but not quite. Crabs and leeches would cling to his body, body, cutting him throughout each tormented night, and insects who happened to be sharing the cell with him would climb up on his face, seeking refuge. Every moment he ever spent outside of his cell afterwards would be focused on becoming stronger and smarter, preparing himself to one day escape the prison and accrue power once outside its walls. Number 1. Magneto. One of the scariest stories out there in terms of supervillain origins is that of Magneto, made more scary by the fact that it's actually based off of real-world circumstances experienced by many victims of the events tied to World War II. Magneto grew up being trapped along with many of his family in a camp by World War II German soldiers. Now, I apologize for not being able to say the words that I would like to say here to give this topic the weight that I think it deserves. I think we all agree. But there are certain words and phrases that we are permitted from speaking on this platform, so I apologize for my lighter turn of phrase here and my potentially perceived levity. I promise I do take this subject very seriously. And if you have problems with the fact that we can't say certain words, I would highly recommend that you contact the platform and let them know your thoughts on that. Because yeah, I think that's important to do. Young Magneto would not only have to suffer in these camps, but he'd also have to watch as one by one his family members attempted to escape and often got so close to being truly free, only to be reined back in and pretty much all end up dead in the end. He was forced into taking care of the bodies and disposing of all who perished at the camp as well, becoming a Sonderkommando, which must have felt like psychological torture as well as being grueling work. Sonderkommandos were actually real-world special units, by the way, that existed during World War II, made up of Jewish prisoners from the camps who were forced into disposing of the victims who had been killed in the camps, threatened with their own deaths if they refused the work. In the end, Magneto did escape, but even then, he was met with tragedy. He and his love Magda would escape and start a family, finding a home in a village in the mountains. But after he was revealed to be a mutant, the people turned on him and his family, burning their home to the ground. As Magneto attempted to save his daughter, who was trapped on the upper floor of their home, soldiers attacked him, preventing him from doing so, and she died in the fire.
Number 10. Speed Freak. Speed Freak is a criminal and an addict who killed an inventor and stole his battlesuit in order to become a superpowered addict criminal. His intimidating battlesuit helps him to fly as well as create holographic images and features adamantium cutting blades as well as projectile barbs, which have helped him to go toe-to-toe with the Hulk, even managing to slice open the Hulk's stomach at one point. What makes Speed Freak scary is his lack of humanity, working as a killer for hire in order to feed his addiction. He also shows no care for potential collateral damage, once attacking an AIDS benefit concert in order to try and take out one of his targets. Speed Freak was one of the villains killed in the Stamford incident, a fight between a group of villains and the New Warriors, which resulted in huge amounts of collateral damage and directly led to the Superhero Registration Act and the resulting Civil War. Certainly not the scariest villain on this list, but one I wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley nonetheless. Number 9. The Dogs of War. Developed by the United States military for hunting down the Jade Giant, the Dogs of War were 4 ordinary dogs that were fed gamma-infused meat that transformed them into gamma mutates. They were used to track the Hulk's scent and were trained to attack him when they found him, but being rage-fueled Hulk dogs, they attacked both the Hulk and their military handlers. Now, being attacked by a dog is a horrifying experience under the best of circumstances, but dealing with giant canines with super strength and anger issues is even worse. These paralyzing pooches had only one appearance in Incredible Hulk Volume 2, Issue 14, but they made an impact, being adapted on screen in the criminally underrated Hulk film a couple years later.
And at number 8, Sauron. Don't be confused by its name. This is no Middle-earth Sauron, luckily. Sauron of the Marvel Universe is quite different, despite being evil and having taken the name Sauron after the Lord of the Rings villain. Sauron is the alter ego of Carl Lycos, who has a Jekyll and Hyde relationship of sorts with this humanoid pterodactyl form of his. He's essentially an energy vampire who often lives within the prehistoric jungle known as the Savage Land. First appearing in this form in X-Men issue 60 back in 1969, Sauron was initially meant to be a giant bat-like creature. But back in those times, the comics code authority was still in effect, somewhat. And his creators, Roy Thomas and Neil Adams, inquired with the organization, who suggested that the character's vampiric traits would be in violation of the code. So instead of going with something that resembled a giant vampire bat, which was banned according to the code, they ended up opting out for a form that looked more like a pterodactyl. Anywho, what can Sauron do aside from look absolutely terrifying? Well, he's got all the superhuman fixings: strength, speed, stamina, durability, and intelligence. He flies, duh, has hypnotic eyes, fire breath, razor-sharp claws, and most importantly, he can absorb life forces possesses a mutant powers, and can sense mutants too. In addition to this, he can gain the powers of other mutants. Once, while battling against the Avengers and the X-Men, he was shot in the head by the second Black Widow, but survived thanks to having absorbed Wolverine's healing factor. And at 7, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is most well known in Marvel Comics for being the first foe of Wolverine's, the enemy in which Wolverine and the Hulk take on together. Based on the Wendigo legend of the Algonquin people, it's a large, beastly creature with superhuman strength, stamina, durability, and agility. It has enhanced speed, hardened and sharp talons, and a regenerative healing factor. It's found in the woods of northern Canada and is the result of a curse that takes place under very specific conditions, primarily when a human in the forests feed on human flesh. Any of you familiar with the recent video game title Until Dawn may be familiar with the legends, although the Wendigo of Marvel Comics looks quite different than the video game's representation. Now, over the years, the Wendigo has taken on its fair share of mutants, including Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and the members of Alpha Flight. And the Wendigo isn't just one character either. Various different Wendigo have appeared over the years, all formerly humans who partook in cannibalism and have become these wretched creatures. And at 6, Predator X. Predator X first hit the panels of Marvel Comics back in 2007 in New X-Men issue 34. It is a grotesque beast, reptile-like, with superhuman strength and speed, sharp claws and teeth, toxic saliva, accelerated hearing, and its body is covered in non-toxic inorganic mercury. That latter bit means it is highly resistant to physical damage and can draw materials in the environment surrounding it to help reform itself. So why is it scary? If you aren't already kind of freaked out by it? Well, it can track mutants on their genetic signature and is pretty much tireless, meaning it can track its prey relentlessly until it succeeds, wearing down its target for as long as necessary. It can run at speeds of 199 kilometers an hour for a total of 19 hours straight before having to slow down. Luckily, its insides are not as durable as its outsides. Wolverine managed to kill it by tearing it apart from the inside out with his claws. But fun fact, it killed one of the villains that we mentioned on our part 1 list, Peeper, who it devoured on the side of a road. It's vicious to say the least. Predator X was created thanks to Stryker, who, prior to dying, requested that a living weapon be made in order to combat the coming of a mutant Antichrist, aka Hope Summers. Moving on to number 5, Sugar Man. Sugar Man is by no means a good X-Men villain, but he is definitely a terrifying one to take in. First debuting in the Age of Apocalypse timeline, Earth 295, in Generation Next issue 2 in 1995, Sugar Man would manage to sneak his way out of that reality and onto Earth 616, when bombs are blowing the crap out of 295 as a last resort means to be rid of Apocalypse. Sugar Man, aside from being hideous and offensive to the eyes, is an expert biologist and geneticist. He has 4 arms, superhuman strength, razor-sharp teeth and claws, an indefinitely long bioelectric tongue, ew, an enhanced sense of smell, and has the ability to alter his body mass and size, which is actually how he sneaked his way over to 616, by hiding in Colossus's boot, of all places. He's responsible for a handful of deaths on Earth 295, and when he arrives on 616, he ends up forcibly enslaving hundreds of mutants for the magistrates. The reason why he really ends up on this list? Just look at him. From scary looks to scary intentions, moving on to number 4, we have the Reavers. The Reavers are a team of criminal cyborgs who first debuted in Uncanny X-Men issue 229 back in May of 1988, created by Chris Claremont and Mark Silvestri. The Reavers, led by a man named Donald Pierce, are dedicated to the destruction of mutants, and specifically the destruction of Wolverine. Initially, they were a gang of looters who operated in Australia, but began to branch out when they used the mutant gateway to teleport across the globe in order to pull off more sophisticated robberies. The X-Men stopped them, with only a handful of the Reavers escaping that first encounter, later reassembling under Pierce, who takes the team into a more militarized direction, using them as an assassination squadron of sorts bent on taking vengeance on the X-Men. They've done some pretty messed up stuff over the years, including capturing Wolverine, torturing him, and crucifying him. They're an extremist team bent on eliminating mutant kind, humans who have become cyborgs as part of the cause, and they've even stirred up trouble in alternate timelines too. In Age of Apocalypse, they were a band of human traitors who served the titular villain, and in the Ultimate Marvel universe, they are human gladiators who have undergone surgery to become cyborgs, all for the purpose of hunting down mutants on live television. That's messed up. I mean, imagine running into a team of extremists like that who embrace technology in order to wipe out a race. Yeah, they're scary because they're a foe of the X-Men who are a little bit more realistic antagonists compared to some of their other enemies. We also got to see the Reavers make a cinematic debut in Logan, and needless to say, they're pretty darn scary in their live-action adaptation as well. And at 3, the Purifiers. The Purifiers are one step up from the Reavers, and are unsettling for very similar reasons. They're a paramilitary and terrorist organization, also created by Chris Claremont, that debuted in Marvel graphic novel issue 5, X-Men God Loves, Man Kills. And and they are led by none other than Reverend William Stryker, who is their founder. So their whole shtick is that they're Christian fundamentalists who believe that they are fighting a holy war against mutants. They see mutants as the children of the devil and therefore need to be exterminated. In their first appearance, they abducted Charles Xavier and several members of the X-Men team, killed mutant children, fought against Magneto, and almost executed Kitty Pryde. Luckily for her, one of Stryker's guards grew horrified with his actions and shot Stryker, resulting in Kitty getting away and Stryker being sent to prison. That wasn't the last of them though. Even after Stryker no longer led the group, other successors took over the leadership mantle, including his own son Jason Stryker. Later on, the Purifiers got their hands on Warren Worthington III's wings and used blood from them, extracted Apocalypse's techno-organic strain inside of them in order to graft it and then give to the Purifiers, giving them their own wings, a specific subgroup that would be called the Choir, whose whole MO was to, I quote, strike down Satan's spawn with God's own might. Archangel would later massacre all of the Choir minus 3 members. And at number 2, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister is one of the most notorious X-Men villains. Sinister, aka Nathaniel Essex, first debuted as the employer of the assassin group the Marauders, mentioned in the Uncanny X-Men issue 212 in 1986, but first seen in the Uncanny X-Men issue 221, almost a whole year later. Not only is his aesthetic unsettling, but he's also capable of some really terrifying stuff. He's telepathic, telekinetic, has superhuman strength, durability, and longevity, can create concussive energy projections, and, potentially scariest of all, can manipulate his body on a molecular level. Born in 1859, he was obsessed with Darwin's theories and was considered an unorthodox biologist, conducting immoral experiments that would make him an outcast amongst his peers. He even dug up his dead firstborn child to experiment on it. After awakening Apocalypse, the villain would painfully transform him into an ageless being, with Essex taking on the name Sinister, which was the last thing that his wife called him on her deathbed. It's a wee bit masochistic, isn't it? And finally, in our number 1 spot, the Phoenix Force. One of the most terrifying foes that the X-Men have ever faced off against is the Phoenix Force, an entity that is an immortal and immutable manifestation of the universal force of life and passion, born of the void between states of being, the nexus of all psionic energy which does, has, and ever will exist within the Marvel multiverse. The Phoenix Force requires a host, and it manifested within Jean Grey, who, when losing control of it, became the Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix has a vast amount of abilities, is able to manipulate matter, energy, and life force, and has cosmic awareness, all of which makes Jean's Dark Phoenix incredibly powerful and threatening. In many cases, in alternate realities, Jean has completely wiped out the planet or consumed the universe when not stopped by the X-Men. And while much of the Phoenix saga has been retconned, along with Jean dying and coming back to life, and then dying and coming back to life again, the Phoenix Force has still proven to be rather deadly regardless. Over the years in the comics, the Phoenix Force has proven capable of taking on powerful foes like the Beyonder, absorbing stars for energy that creates supernovas capable of wiping out entire planets, and even flat out wiping out all of existence in What If issue 27 volume 1. I don't know about you guys, but to me that's scary as hell. And at number 10, Holocaust. I mean, his name enough should have you wary. Holocaust first appeared in 1995's X-Men Alpha, and is one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse. Holocaust was initially from the Age of Apocalypse timeline, where he was known as Nemesis, where he was said to be one of Apocalypse's children. Magneto would strip Nemesis of his flesh in a battle, enraged for the deaths that Nemesis had caused. His body was then retrieved by Apocalypse, who gave him to Dark Beast, who managed to capture his spiritual essence and put it inside a near indestructible crystalline exo-armor, a procedure in which Nemesis became Holocaust, or rather, Holocaust was born. This character is particularly terrifying for one specific reason: his abilities. He initially possessed the power to generate highly destructive bionuclear microwave energy blasts, which can be super destructive. And later on, when he became an energy being, he gained the ability to drain the life force from other beings in order to charge his own exoskeleton that acted as a suit of armor for him. He's pretty much physically invulnerable, or at least he was. The character was killed by Hyperion, who cracked open Holocaust's exoskeleton and then absorbed all of his bioenergy into himself by literally inhaling him. So that's a fun way to go. And at number 9, Krakoa. Krakoa is one of the X-Men's earliest villains, having appeared in Giant Size X-Men issue 1 in 1975. There's been 2 versions of Krakoa over the years, with the first being the villainous one. It appeared initially as a small island in the Pacific Ocean that was located near a nuclear bombing test site. The radiation from that test site mutated the island's ecosystem, which altered the island into a hive mind entity in 1945, something that Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos witnessed. They encountered much of the island's intelligence and established a peaceful treaty in exchange for keeping the island's existence a complete secret. Now flash forward to 1975. Krakoa decides it's hungry and it wants to feed on the life force of mutants, because I guess mutants are tastier than humans. It kills a young mutant team and later captures the original iteration iteration of X-Men. This is what causes Professor Xavier to create the second wave of X-Men, the team that consists of Wolverine, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Thunderbird, Sunfire, and Banshee, all to save the first iteration. Polaris eventually launches Krakoa into outer space, and later it becomes captured by the Stranger. Now this Krakoa is perhaps one of the most physically intimidating entities that the mutant team has ever fought. It is a literal monstrous island. The second version of it though, in case you're wondering, is much more benevolent, having been grown by a member of the Hellfire Club but wanting to redeem itself with the X-Men and become one of them. It ends up becoming a part of the school and even helps the X-Men financially by growing diamonds on a tree that it produces. Man, imagine having a friend who could grow diamonds on trees for you. It's the dream.
Number 8. Arcade. Arcade first appeared in Marvel Team-Up Volume 1, number 65 back in 1978. Now Arcade has no powers, but you don't need them to be a scary or a credible threat. Arcade has a genius-level intellect and a penchant for murder that has led him down the path to be a hitman. But he doesn't just kill people. No, he makes them work their way through elaborate arenas of his own design, in his amusement park-inspired murder world. Arcade never seems to have a hard time kidnapping people either. You're living your life one minute, next, boom, you're in murder world. While Arcade has gone up against many Marvel heroes, he has had many notable encounters with the X-Men. When possible, he likes to get people in pairs to make more interesting, like Gambit and Wolverine. The rooms will be designed with a myriad of traps and dangers to test the specific occupant's skill set and mental fortitude. Now, some may be like, scary, but you may change your tune if you woke up kidnapped in Murder World. Number 7. David Moreau. David Moreau is yet another normal human, but is on here for the effect he has had on the X-Men verse. Moreau is also known by the name the G-Engineer. He first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 236 back in 1988, and was allied with the island of Genosha, a land whose prosperity had been built on the backs of mutant slavery, which had been made possible thanks to Moreau's invention of a mind control device. He also invented the mutate process, wherein 13-year-olds were tested for the X gene, and if it was found, they were turned into mutates, with their memories erased and rendered completely obedient. Now, Moreau can't get all the villain cred here. His mission was helped along by tech given to him by a villain who was in part 2, the Sugar Man. The Sugar Man had obtained a version of this tech from his reality, that being the Age of Apocalypse, and that version of Mr. Sinister. Still horrifying stuff, and a threat to not just the X-Men, but mutants everywhere. Number 6. Nimrod. Don't let the name fool you. Nimrod is a force to be reckoned with. First appearing in 1985 in Uncanny X-Men number 191. Nimrod comes from the now famous Days of Future Past storyline, a descendant of the robotic hunting machines, the Sentinels. His name is actually a biblical one that means mighty hunter. The fact that it translates to a playground insult years later, that's not his fault. Nimrod was created by the Sentinels to be the ultimate mutant hunting weapon, and he is nigh invulnerable. After some time travel, he decides that he doesn't need to eliminate all mutants, just the X-Men, powerful ones who are outlaws, who have an impact on the timeline. It's very Terminator-esque, and that's terrifying. That scene in the first Terminator where it's coming down the hall towards them dragging its foot and it seems slow, but then it pans out and you see how fast it's really moving, that still messes me up. The scene and the sound of it dragging its foot, just the... Number 5. Archangel. Warren Worthington III gets to be so high up because of just one impact his villainous turn made on X-Men history, and it's a great storyline. Warren was one of the original X-Men, a founding member from all the way back in X-Men number 1 in 1963. Warren always had a complicated relationship with his mutation, the wings of an angel, or at least it seems that way now. At first he was a stereotypical air character, then he got broody when things got angsty in the 80s. Warren's descent towards villainy began with X-Factor, a group Warren was backing, which ends up getting viewed as mutant hunters for hire, and after he is exposed as the backer, his wings are mutilated and develop gangrene, leading to them needing to be amputated. Warren is devastated and commandeers a jet that has been sabotaged to blow up. He doesn't know that. Before it does, he is transported away by Apocalypse, who offers him a spot as a horseman. Apocalypse performs extensive genetic alterations that change Warren's appearance and give him metallic wings, and for a time, he was the horseman Death. Manipulated by Apocalypse, he turns harshly on his friends. As Archangel, he was a force to be reckoned with, and his path towards redemption and occasional slips back make for good reading. The design is great, those sharp metallic wings, and again, he's someone who knows the team's weaknesses. He is good currently, which, well, bleh. Give me back my Archangel. Number 4. Mastermind. We're talking about the first villain to have that name, who was instrumental in the Phoenix arc. This character first debuted in 1964 in X-Men number 4, and for our purposes we need Jason Wingard. Mastermind has the power to cast illusions, vivid and realistic ones, that he uses to manipulate people to his whims. He can also alter people's senses, how they feel, what they see, and most importantly how they perceive him. He likes to up his handsomeness game. What makes him so formidable is that he can even affect powerful telepaths, such as Xavier and most notably notably Jean Grey. This occurred during his association with the Hellfire Club. He at first uses his powers to pose as Nikos and initiate a romance with the help of Emma Frost. He is then able to convince Jean that it was Victorian times and they were married, and that she was the Black Queen. Mastermind doesn't make it, but his legacy lives on, as does his creepy mind manipulation plot. Scary, to be made to think you live in a bodice ripper. Mental manipulation is scary stuff. Number 3. Strife. Okay, so some explanations, but the Cliff Notes version. Strife is a clone of Cable, who first appeared in 1990 in New Mutants number 86. Strife was raised by Apocalypse, in the future, for the purposes of being a host body. However, Apocalypse decides against it once he realizes that Strife is a clone, as he thought he had the real Cable, but he was wrong. Strife's contribution to this list is the Legacy virus, which was first Legacy 1, then Legacy 2, but would eventually mutate into Legacy 3. The virus was set to target mutants when their X gene was activated, which would ultimately cause the body to stop being able to produce healthy cells and lead to death. But before the end, the victim's powers would go haywire, causing much damage to those around them. Strife took his time perfecting this virus, that's why there's multiple versions, except for 3, which was a mutated version that could infect everybody. Number 2. Cassandra Nova. This is a more recent character appearing in 2001 during the new X-Men number 21, as an antagonist to the X-Men and Charles Xavier specifically. So bear with me, because it's gonna get a little zany. Cassandra Nova is Charles Xavier's twin, sorta. But she was conceived without a body, and copied one from Charles in the womb. However, Charles sensed her terrifying thoughts, again in the womb, so he strangled her, and she was stillborn, but her essence survived. Eventually, she was able to build an all-new body. She is Charles's opposite, a dark mirror. Her first act to announce herself to the X-Men was to kill 16 million mutants on Genosha in a mass mutant genocide. As a Mumadrai, Nova was meant to have to wrestle with Charles for control of his body, but thanks to his mutant abilities and hence hers, she could build her own. She has psychic powers compared to Charles, plus telekinesis, phasing ability, the ability to create psionic armor and block attacks, and a hate-on for the X-Men. It's just a lot. And number 1. You guys have been waiting for it. You're excited. It's Proteus. Proteus debuted in 1979 in Uncanny X-Men number 125. Proteus was meant to be one of the strongest mutants ever conceived. Born as Kevin McTaggart, he is the son of longtime X-Men ally Moira McTaggart. However, Kevin's powers are so intense they cause him to crave energy to replace what he has expended. In fact, he's actually made of pure energy. His mother had to keep him in containment to protect him and others, but he eventually escaped and put his powers to use, which includes body possession, so he can hop from host to host. He also has psionic energy composition and reality warping abilities that he can actually control. Before he was known as Proteus, he was known simply as Mutant X. So because of the fact that he exists in a pure energy state, the bodies that he hops into, he uses them up pretty quickly, and Proteus normally just burns them out. He could leave before he kills them, but he just doesn't. He also has access to all their memories even after he's left, and has hopped into some of the X-Men's bodies. He's been known to melt buildings, reverse gravity, stretch people into liquid, and more. Basically whatever he can imagine, he can do. He eventually became able to possess multiple individuals at the same time and travel interdimensionally. He's even attempted to bring the astral plane into normal reality. His powers are out of control. The fact that they defeat him at all is a minor miracle each time. Proteus is terrifying in the scope of his power and the fact that really you can't get rid of him.